Lux Burgess, how are you?
I'm doing well.
It's great to have you here at the Chamber. And first of all, I want to congratulate you for putting your name forward. It's not an easy thing to do. Not that it's not just physically tiring, but it's emotionally.
Definitely that too. Yeah.
It's emotionally tiring too. You know, I think a lot of people that don't ever do it, they don't understand how emotionally tiring it is. Whether you're defending a position or whether you're, proposing a position, it can become exhausting as well. So, kudos to you, sir.
Thank you very much
for doing that. And you're running for the Green Party.
Correct.
Here in Cambridge, and the Green Party is starting to make some real strides, I think. There's no question about it. You can see how the envelope of votes getting captured are getting bigger and bigger and bigger across the country. And I think if we had proportional representation, I think the Green Party would be really happy, and probably the rest of the country would be too. Mm-hmm. So how do you feel about proportional representation?
Absolutely for it. The Green Party has been pushing for it for a long time, and honestly, it's one of my biggest beefs with the Trudeau administration is that he promised to look at electoral reform and then went back on that. And that's probably one of the reasons that I'm here today, because something that's pretty important to me and pretty important to the Green Party, for sure.
I think if you look back at that election in 2015, the reason he got a majority government was because he said, I'm going to go for electoral reform.
Absolutely.
And you look at the following elections, maybe the reason he never got a majority again was because he failed on that one important question. But, we're at a different time right now. We came through COVID, and we had, probably the trial of the century, so to speak, on our universal health care system. Is it right? Is it what we need? Is it, folks will see on the video, and you can see here that I got the scruffy old beard going, and it's because I had neck surgery a week or so ago, and I can't leave one spot unshaven. That would look really weird. So, not that this doesn't look weird, but in any event, it really, over the course of the last 4 months, I've actually had 2 minor surgeries. But what I really found through that whole process was, the thankfulness I have for the universal health care system that we have. The doctors were incredible. The surgeons were, even better, thankfully. The nurses that, took care of me while I was in the hospital and while I was in surgery were just brilliant, fantastic people. You couldn't have asked for a better experience. Nobody wants to go through that, but I tell everybody right now, you're going to have a wonderful experience if you have to have an operation because of the people. And the people are really, really important. Yeah. What I'm hoping, because we're in a different time right now, everything's about the tariffs, everything's about the economy. Are we going to lose focus on the deficiencies we found in the pandemic that we need to address now? What do you think?
Are we going to lose focus? I don't think we're going to 100% lose focus on healthcare. Going door to door and talking with people out in the neighborhoods, healthcare is definitely still top of mind. I think definitely tariffs is number 1, but healthcare is probably number 2 right now. It's not going to go away. Healthcare is in trouble in Canada, for sure. It's a good system, and we love our public health care, but anyone that's been in that system recently knows that wait times are long, and it can be hard to get the services that you need, for sure. I've got an aging father who's having some mobility issues right now, and he's had to kind of push, advocate for himself to be like, hey, I need this help right now, and eventually someone will listen, and he will get the service that he needs, but it's not as quick and not as good as it should be in the system that we have in Canada. So, I think for sure we need to be looking at healthcare and keeping it top of mind.
I hope we have individuals like you get elected in this country and say, yes, we need to focus on the matters of at hand, but we can't ever forget that. I get the feeling just about every single day, especially the last 3 or 4 months, that we've forgotten, all of the problems that we had during COVID, and we can't go, we literally can't go from, COVID that just about collapsed our economy to now tariffs collapsing our economy, and prospectively another pandemic that could collapse our economy. We can't do that. And so we need to stay focused, and we need to learn from our not our mistakes, because I don't think we ever really anticipated what a global pandemic would actually do to us.
Yeah.
But what we do need to be reminded all the time is stay focused on those things. Let's learn from our past, and let's make sure we implement the right things. But it's all going to cost money.
Yeah.
So, Lux, the talk of the day, of course, is tariffs. The impact on our economy, the impact on our citizenry that works and expects to get up in the morning and go to a job that they don't know right now is going to be there or not be there. Canada's a really, really, really tiny country in the global scheme of things, but we have 41 million people. We have a great reputation, but are we going to be able to get through this? And what kind of leadership do you think we're going to need to get through this whole debacle with the United States and frankly, the rest of the world?
I think as far as leadership, we need someone who can really be Team Canada. And I've really seen that from the Green Party leadership for sure. They want to focus on working together as Team Canada and coming together as a Canadian people and just focusing on, not the differences, but what we can to do together. Elizabeth May in particular has called for, a war cabinet, if you will, of all the leaders of the different parties to work together and come together and find those common bonds that we can find to work together and stand up to the U.S. And I think that's the kind of leadership we need.
Do you think that there's a possibility, regardless of who ends up being the leader of this country and the party that gains control, maybe not in a majority sense, but even in a minority sense, do you think it's a possibility for all the leaders of the parties to come together and say, let's get focused on solving this particular problem that we have? Because this is monumental. Yeah. This is, all of the things that the Green Party has as priorities and all of the things that every citizen has as priorities in their life are really centered around a strong and vibrant and prosperous economy. Do you think that the leaders are going to come together, or are we going to have the same bickering that goes on all the time?
I would like to say that they will come together. From what I've seen in Parliament in the past, I think that's probably not a great chance. But
what are your fears about that? Is it basically the personalities that you think are going to be there, or is it that they're not necessarily focused on the important things to Canadians?
Definitely there's some personality to it. Some of the leaders that I've seen have some animosity towards each other, let's say. I don't know. As I said, I think I would like to say that we can come together as a Canadian people, but from the leaders that I've seen, I'm not sure we're quite there yet, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Given that, there was, I really think that the tables were kind of turned a little bit. Mark Carney, when he took control of the Liberal Party and became the Prime Minister, he exercised his options to do the things that he wanted to do or needed to do, and he immediately took the wind out of the Conservative Party's sails by canceling the consumer gas tax. I know that the Green Party is very, very convinced that carbon pricing is important. It's a measure. It's not the only measure, but it is a measure to get to a carbon-free environment. That's really important. How do you feel about that move, and how do you think we right that ship going forward? Because I would venture to say that nobody in leadership, if it's the Conservatives or the Liberals in power, even if it was the NDP in power, I don't think they're bringing back any carbon pricing anytime soon.
No, and for sure the Green Party seems to be the only party that seems to be, in favor of carbon pricing right now. And it's not an easy sell. I think the Liberals did a pretty shoddy job of kind of selling it to the people in, explaining how it worked and that, it was basically revenue neutral and you get your money back. I think the Greens have to stand by it, though. It's necessary. It seems to be, proven to be the best way to fight climate change. And look, I'll be honest with you, I've got 2 gas-powered cars in my driveway. I work in the trades. I've got tools that I haul around, and I like to haul my canoe on the weekend. So, carbon pricing hits me as well as anybody else. Nobody likes to see those gas prices go up. But, it seems to be the only way that we've seen that's pretty effective for shifting the, the transportation costs. So
I just wonder if the way they did it maybe was maybe the wrong way. I always said to people, they would complain about it. I would complain about it. You see it going up, and then you get this check every few months, and I keep thinking to myself, like, what do they do? Well, what they're trying to do is retrain my habits, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And penalize me for doing the things that sometimes I need to do. But I guess going after that fringe element of things that you want to do, slow them down a little bit. Wouldn't it have been better to scale back on the carbon pricing a little bit, don't charge quite as much, but take that money and rather than just give it back to people, actually invest it into technology that can give us a greener country and invest in initiatives to lessen our dependency on our carbon fuels? Like, does that not? I don't know. I'm not an expert on it, but I just think if you're just going to tax me to give it back to me to try and change my habits, that's not going to work nearly as much as taking my money and actually investing it in something that's going to actually help.
Yeah, again, I think it was kind of a messaging, a botched messaging deal from the Liberals. They could have done a better job of explaining, hey, we're taking this money from you, but we need to invest it over here. We need to give it back to you because of this, and we're expecting these results. I just think they didn't do a very good job of selling that to the people, for sure.
Yeah. Foreign leadership is going to be really, really important. Federal election, it's not a provincial election, so on the federal landscape, you're talking a lot about interaction between Canada and other nations around the world. We, of course, have our allies. We have our close allies. We have our fringe allies. We have also enemies that we would put out there as, we might do business with them, but we're always watching what they do because we don't necessarily trust them. Foreign leadership is going to be really, really, really important going forward, given the whole tariff situation. Mm-hmm. If we are moving towards diversifying our trade away from the United States, which I think virtually every Canadian says we probably got to do that.
Yeah, have to.
Relationships are going to be important. Canada's respected around the world, probably as much or more than any other country around the world. We're the friendly people. Everybody wants to do business with. Mm-hmm. As the Chamber of Commerce president, I get phone calls from countries all over the place that say, hey, is there anybody who wants to do business here? Last week I had a delegation in from Saudi Arabia.
Really?
You got any companies here that want to do business? We got all kinds of projects in Saudi Arabia to do. But I think relationship building is going to be the number one. I think if I was on the other side of the ocean, I'd be looking at Canada saying, yes, love Canadians. They're great people. Love to do business with them. But you know what? They're pretty tied up with the Americans. How do we undo that? How do you think your leadership in the Green Party will be able to help the inevitable leadership of the country develop those, because if you go over to Europe, most of them are very, very intent on their green energy policies.
Yep.
And we don't comply with a lot of them. And how are we going to do that, and how will your leadership help do that?
That was another thing I was going to say about carbon pricing, is that these other parties want to take it away, but they can only take it away so much, or we're not going to be able to trade with the EU. They require it. We have to have it. So
right.
These parties saying, we're going to take away the carbon pricing, like, there's only so much they can do because we can't trade with the US anymore. So we're going to have to look to the European Union. And they require these carbon pricing, otherwise we can't trade with them. So as far as our leaders looking towards the EU and other countries as well, I think both the Green Party co-leaders, Jonathan Pedno and Elizabeth May, have good track records of working, outside of the country. Jonathan Pedno was a reporter working, in war zones and that kind of thing outside of the country for a long period of time. I think they both just have great connections outside of the country. Elizabeth May has been an advocate for the climate across the globe for years and decades now. So, I think they could have those connections and make those connections that we need to trade outside of our country for sure.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the hiccup in talking with you as opposed to some of the other candidates from some of the other parties. They're probably not going to look at that as a hurdle when, as you put it very, very well, if we don't have those green policy initiatives embedded in our trade agreements with the European Union, they can't deal with us. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how, Mark Carney has come out, Pierre Poilievre has come out and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to expand we're going to diversify, we're going to trade with the rest of the world as much as we possibly can. The problem is going to be, we got some hurdles to climb to do that. And it's not just the difficulty in retraining our small and medium-sized companies to say, okay, you got to start looking to Europe. They view that as the moon. Like, are you kidding me? I can throw my stuff on a truck and it gets to the States tomorrow afternoon. How do I do that when I'm dealing with somebody in, France? Just doesn't happen that easy. But there are going to be some policy initiatives that I think is really going to be the foundation of the Green Party moving forward to be able to help that governing party develop these relationships, because they are very robust, especially if we're going to be getting rid of, or going to be trying to sell our resources around the world, right? So how do you square that hole?
How do we square, trading with other countries?
Yeah. Do you think it's going to be? Do you think it's going to be difficult for us to actually move our resources to the international market and maintain a responsibility to the environment?
I think it will, and I think that's partly why we need to start focusing on utilizing our natural resources in this country. One of the big platforms that the Green Party has this time around is that, right now Canada has all these natural resources, and we just send them raw outside of the country, mostly to the U.S., but other places as well. What we really want to focus on is, utilizing them in Canada and then shipping the fabricated products outside of the country. And I think that might be a little bit easier to handle rather than just us trying to figure out ways to ship these raw materials across the globe.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting. As you probably know, Cambridge is kind of the center of the universe from Canadian nuclear power. We've got BWXT who are, up to their necks.
I grew up in Kincardine, Ontario, like right by the Bruce nuclear power plant, so I'm familiar with the connection between here and there.
Exactly, and that's probably the future of where we're going to get our energy from. At this point anyway, so small modular reactors, really a kind of a Canadian-made solution to not having to build these great big Bruce nuclear plants and all of those kinds of things. Do you think Canada has the ability to be able to stand that up on a global perspective and say, we can be your energy providers that are green energy providers through nuclear?
Nuclear is kind of a gray area for the Green Party, so I don't know that I want to speak. Well, I will speak on it. The Green Party has been against, nuclear power for a long time.
Yep.
Recently, they've kind of shifted their tone a little bit because I think people like me see that, it could be a green energy future. As I said, I grew up right next to the Bruce nuclear, so I can't say that I'm anti-nuclear, or none of my family or friends would be talking to me anymore.
Yeah.
Do I think we could start exporting that? Yeah, I'm hesitant to say yes, we could 100% do that, but I think it's definitely an option we should be looking at for sure. As someone who has kind of a nucleer background in my hometown, then I think I agree.
I think from a balanced perspective, we're all trying to say, the future might be EVs, right? Yeah. So, the more carbon powered vehicles we get off the road, the better we're going to be if we can have electric vehicles. The problem is there's no power grid to be able to support everybody to have an electric vehicle. Yeah. We'd have brownouts all the time. And to build a Bruce nuclear plant takes years and years and years for that to happen. So the small modular reactors are going to be the thing that's going to be able to stand up relatively quickly. But the rest of the world's in exactly the same boat. We're not any different from anyone else. So, I understand where the Green Party would say, oh, nuclear, like glow in the dark, all of this kind of tragic stuff. I get that, but would you favor, what probably would be out there to say, hey, this is very safe, done properly, it's very safe, power production. Wouldn't you favor that over coal?
Absolutely, but I think to your point, I think what I would say is that especially right now, the Green Party's platform is, instead of building more nuclear, is to nationalize the electric grid. So make sure that we can get, power all the way across the country. We can get clean power from Manitoba and Saskatchewan, where they have actual clean power, Quebec, where they've got hydropower that they could sell to us. If we can nationalize that energy grid and actually get power all the way across the country, we maybe wouldn't need quite as much nuclear as Ontario probably needs right now.
Yep.
If we could all kind of work together across provincial lines and make that kind of happen nationally.
Well, maybe if we didn't have to turn the lights on in the U.S., we could save some of that power too. But, that's Doug Ford's problem. But in any event, I think it's good. Lux, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about you. You mentioned your background, where you grew up, but tell us a little bit about you, what you're doing. How your personal life, if you want to get into that. Just tell us a little bit about you so that we understand better who you are.
Sure, yeah. I've been living in Cambridge for about 12 years, just over a decade. I work for a company here in Cambridge called,
No, you can. Yeah,
sure. They're a member of the chamber. I can say their name.
Yeah.
Comcor Environmental Limited,
Yeah.
A local engineering consulting firm. I've been with them for almost 2 decades now. I'm a manager of the National Operations Division. That's kind of my employment life. Comcor specializes in methane extraction for landfills kind of across the country.
So, cool. Yeah.
I work with different municipalities across the country, trying to help them reduce their carbon footprints through landfill emissions. Other than that, I'm a father. I've got 2 wonderful kids. They're 11 and 13. They keep me pretty busy. And my lovely wife, who I met in university, works in the public health sector here in Cambridge.
Awesome. It's interesting that your background in methane extraction, of course, we also have Gerdoa Maresteel, who is a good member of the chamber, supports a lot of our women programming, but they extract methane out of the Cambridge dump and power a lot of the things that they do. And
I work on that facility for
do
sure.
you?
Yeah.
What a great example of how you can utilize something that we otherwise don't know what to do with.
Yeah.
And they've got a great relationship with the Regional Waterloo, and are doing some awesome stuff. It's amazing what they can do there. So, good for you. I think that's awesome. We just need to. There's lots of methane around, man. We could just figure out how to get it into a car. That would be helpful as well. But because we can't stop producing it, we have cows and things like that produce it all the time. Why should the residents of Cambridge vote for you?
I'm here for the residents of Cambridge. I want to vote for the residents of Cambridge. I want to work for the residents of Cambridge. The one thing that's we always talk about at the Green Party is that we work for our residents. We don't have to toe party lines. All of the other parties have a party whip, and they say this is how you're voting, and they stand up and they say yes when the party whip tells them to say yes. Green Party doesn't have that. I'm here to work for the citizens of Cambridge, and I'm here to do what they'd like, and I'm here to represent them. Simple as that.
Yeah, I think it's important. We talked a little bit before we went on and talked about democracy and what's important to what people should hail as important in a democracy. And one of the most important things is your vote. If we don't have a democracy, you don't get to vote. And I think we overshadow that. Well, we know we do because we don't get not everybody votes, right? So some people think it's not important. It's the most important thing. And then the next most important thing is making sure you have the representation in your community that you want to have. So I hope people take the time to not only, I understand the National Party platforms are important to them, but I think they should always take time to look at their own local representative too and make sure they're voting for the person that they think will respond best to their concerns. So good luck.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I think it's going to be an interesting campaign, and whichever way it turns out, you'll have an experience of a lifetime.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in.